it's not only him doing the voice. He's spent countless of hours in a motion capture suit. You know, I feel sorry for him sometimes that he's been in this tight pajamas for so many hours, you know, acting out the body language and the gestures of Harrison Ford, because, you know, he's putting on the hat in a certain way, he's doing things constantly, the kind of part of the character, but also down to, you know, how he moves his face and smirks and blinks.
Should be on the other side of this fortress. There we go.
Well, lovely to meet you. Thank you for hosting this lovely preview event. I've taken lots of videos of all the props and
nice.
the amazing location we've got here as well.
Nice meeting you. Thank you for being here.
No, you too. I guess a good place to start might be, what's like your personal relationship with Indiana Jones like? Are you a fan of it going back to your early years, or kind of when did you first?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I wouldn't say I'm old, maybe I'm old. I'm born in 79, you know, raised in the 80s. So obviously I grew up with Indiana Jones movies. They were, you know, big movies in the 80s in Sweden, as many other parts of Europe as well. So I have these very strong, fond memories of me, you know, watching them on VHS tape with my dad, eating homemade pizza, you know, nice home movie evenings. Almost, you know, maybe a little bit too scary, almost seeing people melting and just screaming in agony. It's like, well, what is this? But still, you know, very intrigued and excited by it. So I have very strong childhood memories of you know, growing up with the movies.
Nice. And how did it come about that Machine Games would be working on Indiana Jones? It seems like a bit of a curveball from people might not have predicted it before you announced it, kind of thing.
Exactly, and that's good, right?
Yeah.
No, but it all started with our Machine Games long-term friend Todd Howard. He had this idea for a very long period of time that he wanted to do a new modern Indiana Jones game. He's a huge Indiana Jones fan himself. And he had the idea of basing the plot of the myth of the Great Circle, or the phenomena of the Great Circle. So he got the opportunity to pitch that to Lucasfilm Games. They were excited also and said, this sounds very interesting, let's look closer at this. Todd Howard thought about which studios or people or developers he knew that could potentially be a good fit, and then he thought of Machine Games in Sweden, and approached us, say, here's an opportunity, and we were, of course, you know, very thrilled and excited, and people were screaming of joy. You know, fantastically cool opportunity to be able to work on this project.
Nice. And you mentioned the Great Circle there. Is that based on a kind of a myth from real life, or is that something that's kind of been invented?
It's a real thing, which makes the whole thing so much more intriguing, because as soon as you start scratching the surface of that, you instantly start, you know, the cogs start spinning. It's like, oh my God, how can this be? What is this all about? And I think that's, to us, it's an important part of what it is developing a great game. If you have a very, very strong narrative, a good story, you know, a good story will survive everything, basically. And with a good story, it should basically work, you know, in the premise of being an elevator pitch where you can instantly pick up and get the premise of the mystery and you know, understand that there's depth to this story to be told. So it was like a very perfect start for this project, to have that as the core premise and then start fleshing out the full synopsis, the full script, trying to work out all the details. Which locations should we visit? What type of gameplay system should we utilize? What type of enemies should we have? What other characters can we bring in? You know, all of that.
Nice. And so that elevator pitch, it's about these points of like historical interest around the globe that are kind of
connects with a great circle, which is really interesting and intriguing. And in our game, you get to know the truth behind it.
Well, that's the thing about Indiana Jones, right? They take these nuggets of something, and then you have to kind of extrapolate.
Expand upon it.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Exactly. And as you know, real life myths goes, that's quite a good one for a video game, isn't it? To have, it's almost like they've plotted out the levels, the locations for you.
I mean, there are so many good things that comes from that, because it puts us on a very global adventure, which is also, from regardless if it's from a gameplay point of view or from a visual creative point of view, you kind of instantly get a lot of interesting locations to pick and choose from. There will be interesting temples, forgotten or overgrown and ruined, throughout that circle where you can really start digging into where you really want to push the player in this global experience. And for me, it's always about trying to get that pacing of getting the maximum contrast in terms of going to the deserts, the jungle. We are showing a section in the snow-peaked Himalayas. Really get a breadth in terms of different new locations, and all of those different new locations sometimes also offers, of course, new interesting game mechanics that you can expand upon or utilize a little bit more.
Nice, and of course you've got to make it fit somehow with the lore, the canon of Indiana Jones across the film franchise. What made you decide to kind of slot it in between Raiders and Last Crusade? Mm-hmm.
There are a couple of different reasons for it. One is that we very early on starting to dissect and pick apart the IP and the franchise of Indiana Jones, trying to analyze and understand what are the things that we enjoy the most with this character and what are the components that actually build that up. And we kind of quickly set our focus on that the first time the world gets exposed to Indiana Jones is with Raiders, and that's the Indiana Jones that we love the most. So getting close to that felt very natural and like an obvious choice. The other aspect is how the story unfolded when we start to flesh out the full script and all the walkthroughs and all the events that needs to take place in the game on the timeline also helped us push into the events between Raiders and Last Crusade.
Amazing. And when you start working with Lucasfilm games, what kind of level of access do you get to the archive of stuff that they must have? I'm picturing, like an Indiana Jones style warehouse with all the wooden crates of everything.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, similar like that, but on the interwebs. No, I mean, we had an invaluable relationship with Lucasfilm games throughout the entire process. And very early on, from the very get-go when we started working on it, we have had representatives within Machine Games from all the different departments, either it's narrative, design, art or audio or production. We've been in weekly meetings with our representatives on their end as well, and having this very nice collaboration with them throughout the entire production cycle. And we did gain access to their archive, to be able to peek under the hood and see concept art and photos from like the early movies, things that ordinary immortal human beings that are Indiana Jones fans would never be able to see. So that has been, a really cool privilege and an experience.
Definitely, I bet. And obviously one of the things you had to identify, I was about to say a challenge, but maybe not necessarily a challenge in a negative way, is how do you kind of realise Indy himself? I know you spoke, I think there was a virtual preview event where you spoke a bit about the lengths you went to make his face look quite so real. Can you speak a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. It's one of there are many different challenges with this project. That is one of the toughest one. Because what we set out to do was never to reinvent Harrison Ford, not to go with likeness, that was never a thing. We absolutely need the likeness, we want to hit the voice, his body gestures, his facial animation, how he moves his face and everything. So very early on, there were, of course, casting sessions, and then Troy Baker was in there, and he just, knocked the competition out in terms of delivering the test lines with the voice. Actually, first time I heard the test lines, I thought it were the reference lines. And I was like, okay, cool, now I want to hear Troy. And it's like, no, that was Troy. It's like, are you kidding me? So that was, really cool experience. And then it's not only him doing the voice. He's spent countless of hours in a motion capture suit. You know, I feel sorry for him sometimes that he's been in this tight pajamas for so many hours, you know, acting out the body language and the gestures of Harrison Ford, because, you know, he's putting on the hat in a certain way, he's doing things constantly, the kind of part of the character, but also down to, you know, how he moves his face and smirks and blinks. And then all of that paired up with the voice, and then of course the 3D mesh. So the 3D mesh itself is built from scratch based on photo sets of Harrison Ford young during the time and era of Raiders. A super advanced rig that runs that mesh, and that is being fed by animation data from the performance of Troy Baker. So it's a very complicated puzzle where a lot of things can go wrong in the end. And, you know, finally getting that into the game, making sure that we have good materials, textures, the work by the character art team, the 3D art team, and then making sure that we have light on it so it looks good, and the effects when it needs to be, you know. So a lot of hard work from a lot of different departments, everything from engineering and tech animators to animators and 3D artists.
SW 003. What was that?
Seaway expedition. He took the cat mummy, Marcus. But why?
But one thing else I wanted to ask about is, I know you came up on the kind of art side of the industry. What are some of the key little kind of details or flourishes or Easter eggs that you felt kind of really tied into the authenticity? One of the things I love, for example, is when you go into the map and then you see the line across the map and things like that. What are some of your kind of favourite things on from a visual sense that you've used to bring it all together?
Oh, good question. There are so many. The travel map that you mentioned, that felt like, you know, like a given. We need to have that because, I mean, that's been mimicked a lot of time when people are trying to be that, you know. That was an obvious one to try to get right. And then, I mean, if you're an Indiana Jones fan and fan of the franchise and the IP, there's a lot of nods and hints and winks to, you know, hidden secrets or, you know, things throughout the entire campaign. But one of the best, very good question. I would say, you know, the Mario note that we see in the beginning. I think that's a lovely gesture that speaks to the human side of Indiana Jones and the warmth in him as a character. And we have some more of that in the game as well. That speaks to his, you know, the warmer side of him as a human being.
Awesome. Well, I look forward to playing much more of it. Thank you very much for taking
the time.
Glad to hear.
Thank you.
On next plane to Rome. Stop. Need help. Stop. Meet me in Vatican. Stop. Indy.